In the old district of Ijaye, tucked away behind the main mosque, there was a small food joint that everyone knew. It wasn't anything fancy, just a simple structure of wood and zinc. But from its back, a constant curl of smoke rose into the air, a signal to every hungry stomach in the neighborhood. The faded paint on the wall read, Mama Rizi Food Joint, but nobody called it that. To the locals, it was simply the Buka behind the mosque. Despite its humble appearance, the place was always buzzing with life. Danfo drivers would park their yellow buses, their engines still warm, and pile in for a hearty meal. University students, weary from lectures, would stop by for a plate of jollof rice that had that perfect smoky bottom pot flavor. Even the local imam, known for his discerning taste, would occasionally send his young apprentice to fetch a takeaway pack. The food was legendary. The stew was rich and deep red, glistening with palm oil. The amala was smooth, the iba perfectly firm. But the star of the show, the thing that kept people coming back day after day, was the goat meat. Oh, that goat meat. It was a masterpiece. So tender it practically melted on your tongue, seasoned to perfection, and always served in generous portions. But there was a strange, unspoken mystery surrounding Mama Risi's buka, a puzzle that no one could quite solve. You see, in all the years she had been there, no one had ever seen a single delivery of meat. Not once. No butcher's truck pulling up in the early morning, no market woman with a heavy basket balanced on her head. Nothing. Yet every single day, without fail, Mama Risi had enough delicious goat meat to feed the entire neighborhood, with plenty to spare. At first, people didn't give it much thought. Maybe her supplier comes before the morning prayer, some would say. Perhaps she has a special arrangement, others would suggest. But as time went on, the whispers grew louder. The mystery deepened, becoming a local legend. How could one small kitchen produce an endless supply of the best goat meat in Ijaya? One person who couldn't let it go was Kazim, the local tailor. His shop was just a stone's throw from the buka, and his mind was as sharp as his needles. He decided he had to uncover the secret. So, one morning, long before the sun had even thought about rising, Kazim made his way to the buka. He found Mama Risi sweeping the front, her movements calm and rhythmic. "Mama, good morning," he said, feigning a bit of hardship. "Business is slow. If I help you sweep and clean up, can I get a free plate of food later?" Mama Risi looked at him, her eyes crinkling at the corners as she smiled warmly. "Of course, my son. Come, help an old woman." Kazim eagerly grabbed a broom. He kept a close eye on everything, watching her every move. He saw her clean the tables, light the firewood, and begin to stir a giant pot of bubbling pepper soup. But there was no sign of any raw meat, not a single piece. Then she picked up another large, empty pot. "I'll be right back," she said, humming a gentle tune as she disappeared behind the kitchen into a small, enclosed backyard. Kazim strained his ears, but heard nothing. A few minutes passed. When Mama Risi returned, the pot was covered, and a tantalizing aroma wafted from it. She placed it on the fire, and when she lifted the lid, Kazim's jaw dropped. The pot was filled to the brim with steaming, perfectly cooked goat meat. He couldn't contain his shock. "Mama, where did you get this meat from? You didn't leave the compound." Mama Risi let out a soft, knowing laugh. She patted his shoulder and said, "My son, when you pray before you cook, your food will never finish." The answer was simple, yet it felt profound and deeply unsatisfying to Kazim. It wasn't the practical explanation he was looking for. He went back to his shop and told his friends what he'd seen. The story spread like wildfire. Soon, the whole neighborhood was buzzing with theories. Some insisted she must have a secret supplier who used a hidden back gate. The younger crowd joked that she owned a magic pot, like something out of a folk tale. The mystery of Mama Risi's endless goat meat was now the hottest topic in Ijaye. Curiosity got the better of a bold young Danfo driver named Sola. One evening, after the last customer had left and Mama Risi had closed up, he decided he would find out the truth once and for all. He found a hiding spot behind a stack of old crates near the back of the buka where he could watch without being seen. He waited. Hours passed. The neighborhood grew silent, bathed in the soft glow of the moon. Around midnight, his patience was rewarded. The back door creaked open, and Mama Risi stepped out. She was dressed in a simple white wrapper, and in her hands, she carried her big, empty cooking pot. She walked with a quiet grace towards the back of the mosque, disappearing into the deep shadows of the unlit alleyway. Sola crept closer, his heart pounding in his chest. He heard her voice, soft and gentle as if she were greeting someone. Then, a strange sound reached him, the faint bleating of goats. Not one or two, but what sounded like a whole flock. But there were no footsteps, no rustling, just the ethereal sound of bleating that echoed for a moment and then faded into complete silence. A few minutes later, Mama Risi emerged from the shadows, her pot now covered, a wisp of steam escaping from the lid. The next morning, Sola recounted his story to the other drivers at the park. They laughed him off. "Sola, you were probably half asleep," one jeered. "You must have dreamt the whole thing," another added. But Sola knew what he had seen, and slowly others began to pay closer attention. They noticed that no matter how long the queue was, Mama Risi's pot of goat meat was never scraped clean. It was, for all intents and purposes, bottomless. Then one day, everything changed. During the holy month of Ramadan, the mosque committee announced a plan to expand their compound. This meant demolishing the small wooden sheds behind the building, including the home of the legendary Buka. The day the demolition crew arrived, a small crowd gathered to watch. The workers, armed with hammers and crowbars, approached Mama Risi's shed. But something strange happened. When the first worker swung his sledgehammer, it felt impossibly heavy in his hands, and he barely made a dent. Another tried to pry a plank loose with a crowbar, but the nail bent and refused to budge. The wood itself seemed to resist, refusing to splinter or break. The men were baffled, whispering amongst themselves. Just then, Mama Risi came out calmly, a serene smile on her face. "Please," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "Allow me to move my things first." She didn't need any help. She packed her cooking pots, her small charcoal stove, and a little brown basket. As dusk fell, she left. That very night, with no wind and no one near it, the little wooden shed collapsed on its own, quietly folding in on itself without a single hammer strike. The next morning, the buka behind the mosque was gone. A collective sigh of disappointment rippled through Ijaye. Where would they get their smoky jollof and heavenly goat meat now? People trudged towards the main road, resigned to finding a lesser meal elsewhere. But as they turned the corner, a familiar, delicious aroma stopped them in their tracks. There, under a large mango tree, was a new makeshift stand. And sitting behind it, stirring a pot with that same gentle grace, was Mama Risi. She was smiling, ready for another day of business. The crowd surged forward, overjoyed. A man at the front of the line joked as she served him. "Mama, your meat never finishes, oh. What is your secret?" Mama Risi looked up, her eyes filled with a warm, genuine light. She ladled a generous amount of stew onto his rice, topped it with 2 large pieces of goat meat, and said, "My son, when your hands are clean and your heart is grateful, heaven will always find a way to refill your pot." From that day on, no one in Ijaye ever asked about the secret of her goat meat again. They simply ate, their faces filled with satisfaction, and wiped their mouths in grateful silence. Because one thing was certain in that old district, wherever Mama Risi decided to cook, there would always be more than enough for everyone. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more tales from around the world. We'll see you in the next video.